Mayor de Blasio, Lieutenant Governor Hochul, distinguished clergy, colleagues, and guests, and all the friends and family of those we honor and remember tonight, good evening. I'm wondering if you have shared this experience. You come upon an old photograph, one you haven't seen in years, yet in an instant, it transports you back in time. You immediately remember the moment and each and every aspect of this snapshot of life. It seems as if most, if not all, of your five senses are brought to life, and you find yourself explaining in detail each facet and every component of the moment. Then, there are times when you come upon a photograph from years ago, and it is as if you are experiencing it for the very first time. It's a revelation of sorts, and it provides you with a new or an unexpected insight into that time. You see and derive things from it that perhaps give you a new perspective on that moment. This same phenomenon happens to me with words, more specifically with words I have written in the past. For example, in my last semester of college, I kept a daily journal. Years later, I read it, and some pages and passages immediately struck me as so familiar, while others felt as I were reading a story of someone else's life and left me pondering the seemingly new revelations. I start with this because from the moment Borough President Jim Molinaro first envisioned this memorial, to each and every speech he gave at this podium on past anniversaries, his lofty goal was honoring and remembering those lost in order to provide you with some measure of comfort. My staff and I carry Borough President Molinaro's charge close to our hearts, and we once again endeavor to live up to that responsibility this evening. Personally, I am keenly aware that these privileged several minutes I have to speak to you, what I consider to be the most important minutes of my work year, allow me the chance to do what all of us in elected of office 16 years ago so desperately wanted to do, and that is, if even for a moment, help you carry the burden of the implications of this day. I believe in my heart, rightly or wrongly, that if I can string together the correct words, they may elicit a tear or a smile, and in fact can be a fleeting source of comfort for you. And while well-intentioned sentiments and emotions exist in me and overwhelm me each year at this time, sometimes that all-out search for the proper words to give life to those feelings does not materialize. For months after last year's anniversary, I've tried to locate them. And after each fruitless attempt, I convinced myself that they would come in time and at some subsequent moment. They did not. And then a few months ago, while going through a trove of old papers, I came across something I had written in December 2001. They're the only record of contemporaneous personal thoughts I have of September 11, 2001. And while they are emotionally raw, I want to share them with you tonight. Just a brief context. I'm blessed with the greatest group of friends someone can have. And for years in the 1990s, on Christmas Eve, we would skip out on our families after midnight and meet at the infamous Leone's for a grown-up version of Kris Kringle. Just before we exchanged gifts, I would give what I will be generous and describe as a speech. As an aside, for those of you who are old enough to remember Leone's, giving an irreverent speech at 2 a.m. after one or two adult beverages was probably the least likely way one might find trouble. But following 9/11, there was no Christmas Eve speech. A week later, though, I gathered with friends for a New Year's Eve. Included in the attendance that night were four of my buddies who were in Manhattan on 9/11. Len Seeley, Steve Matera, Dave Hughes, John Peacock, three of whom worked for the FDNY. The words I read to them that night and want to share with you now start with an imaginary scene of their four dads in heaven as they learn of what was unfolding that horrific morning. The table and chairs were arranged the way they always are for their weekly gathering. It had become more than tradition. Tuesday mornings meant that these four friends came together and played cards, poker, guts, spades. In fact, by now, their gatherings had become all the talk of paradise, the howls of laughter, the shrieks of misfortune, and the undeniable spirit of love and friendship. Come on, we're running late, Matera said, looking at the celestial clock as it inched a shade past 8:30 a.m. Hey, Seeley, where's Hughes? Equally as frustrated, the tall Seeley rolled his light eyes and with a gaze toward Peacock only half kiddingly offered, after last week's debacle, that pigeon may not show. Several minutes later, Hughes walked in. Already a quiet man by nature, he slowly lumbered with a somber look on his face. "I'm sorry I am late, but there seems to be some trouble back home." With that, the four men gazed downward through the miles of universe and cosmic sky, traversing that long jaunt from afterlife to mortal existence. From a spectacular view that could be supplied only by heaven, Matty Matera, John Peacock, Len Seeley, and Richard Hughes stopped, stood, focused, and watched in horror like so many of us as the second plane struck and eventually the Trade Center collapsed. For an instant, the cards and chips lie dormant as fathers looked and watched initially with worry and concern, with anger, and eventually with pride. Listen, my sons, to a father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. I give you sound learning, so do not forsake my teaching. When I was a boy in my father's house, still tender and a child from my mother, he taught me and said, lay hold of my words with all of your heart. Keep my command and you will live. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or swerve from them. Proverbs 4-15. The impact of September 11th has been so great it's almost silly to try to quantify it with words. Nothing could or will do it justice. Time and again during these last few months, I've fallen back on the words of Pablo Picasso in saying, the dust of our everyday lives has been steered like never before. In memorial and funeral masses, time and again, I sat in a pool of tears, jumping back and forth in my mind from focusing on the life of the hero that was being honored to examining my own. The juxtaposition in my head of feeling the loss, the pain, the anger of a stranger and his family to this surreal method of self-evaluation was numbing and overwhelming. And the constant question, what am I supposed to do with this? How do I process it? What do I take from it? Family, pride, hatred, bad luck, the life cycle. There is no such thing as luck. This is impossible. Fear, my own mortality, family will never stop the killing. Look at that little girl cry. This woman is incredibly strong. I've not stopped rubbing my hands this entire Mass. What do I want and need to change? Kill them all. I can't believe these buildings are gone. That guy looks awfully familiar. This is worse than any other one. There's Steve, squeeze his hand. Family. Could I stand there and talk if that was my daughter, my father, who had died? She's looking at her mother. She's crying, her sister. This is so wrong. We have to get together more often. Hold it together. Don't lose it. F it. I don't care if they see me a mess. For me, it keeps coming down to that, family. The familial aspects of this tragedy branch off in so many different directions. Only family could get people through this. Family, not just bloodlines or relatives, but the real meaning of the word. His father is walking up to the altar. Oh man, he's going to talk about his son, the son who followed in his footsteps and joined the ranks of the bravest, the son he searched for. Man, he can't possibly get through this, can he? Maximus Cannizaro, a joke. He actually has the strength to joke, the love of a father, the pride of a father. Some of our fathers are still here with us, some are not. But to a man, I know they are proud of each of us and who we have become. They watched and guided Lenny, Steve, and Dave. That feeling in Dave's stomach that said, Lieutenant, this is not a good place for us to be, was Dave's dad. And when Steve holds Caitlin, a grandfather touches and does feel his granddaughter. They see you guys raising families, bringing up your children, repeating some of the very things they said to you, and they smile. They see you take a building and turn it into a home so that friends, family can gather and they know they did well. They see you win an election and they know that 2 jobs to pay the tuition was worth all the sacrifices. We owe it to those who made us what we are. We owe it to them to be happy and celebrate life. There is no better way to say thank you to them, to lead our lives the way they taught us, the way they would want us, and to raise our children in their image. The theme of these speeches seems to stay the same. It's about celebration of friends, about love, laughter, pain, joy, and all that we have shared together. Tonight, while the world we live in is a completely different place than it was the last time I gave one of these speeches, some things are the same. The very best things in life are relatively simple. They are the touch of a hand of a spouse, the hug of a friend, the thought of a father, and a lesson taught and learned. Those bonds are stronger than steel and concrete. Those ideals transcend evil. Those truths stand true today and will so forever. So from Staten Island to Valhalla, a Happy New Year to all. One of the immediate and striking takeaways I had from reading this speech for the first time in nearly 16 years was how instinctively I realized the importance of the extended family and good people coming together in their time of need. The benefit to my friends and to me was quite evident in late 2001. I believe the same benefit is evident here tonight. Dr. Janice Charney is a resilience researcher and Dean of the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. He's also the co-author of a book called Resilience, The Science of Mastering Life's Greatest Challenges. That's probably a good thing because the New York Times reported that last year Dr. Charney was leaving a deli when he was shot by a disgruntled former employee. He spent 5 days in intensive care and faced a challenging recovery. After 25 years of studying resilience, he said, I had to be resilient myself. Included in Dr. Charney's books were principles on how to build resilience. Practice optimism, rewrite your story, don't personalize it, remember your comebacks. I mention these not to stand here and appear to be tone deaf to the irony or even the insult of me seemingly preaching to you how to be resilient. It would be the height of arrogance for me to think 16 years later I need to tell you how to be resilient. You could probably write your own book on that. I mention this because one of the other fundamental methods of building resilience detailed by Dr. Charney is support others. Studies show that people are more resilient when they have strong support networks and friends and family to help them cope with a crisis. More telling is that we derive an even bigger resilience boost by giving support. This is a very long-winded way of saying, I want to thank you, all of you, for having the courage, the strength, the compassion, and resilience that you have shown by being here for each of these years. I want to thank you for coming out on these difficult anniversaries and for being there for us on this dais. As Dr. Charney's co-author says, any way you can reach out and help other people is a way of moving outside of yourself, and this is an important way to enhance your own strength. Whether we knew it or not then, this is what my friends and I were doing the night of New Year's Eve almost 16 years ago. This is what we did in the first fall and winter following that tragic day at the masses and the memorials, and then at all the street renamings that took place in the months and years that followed. That's what we've been doing on this anniversary at the Mass at Holy Rosary, the Rescue 5 event at Snug Harbor, the annual gathering at the Amazing Angel Circuit, and so many other local remembrances. And that's what you have done for each other and for us here at Postcards. I will close with this. As I continue to rush headlong into middle age, my desire to be better grows as quickly as my age. I read more, or more accurately, I read more material in search for my best angels. I recently discovered an author by the name of Eric Barker who wrote a book that I highly recommend called Barking Up the Wrong Tree. Recently, Mr. Barker wrote this: the specifics of how I have been feeling are of little consequence, but the emotion I am feeling now may be of some use to you. I feel gratuitousness. Yeah, that's my own new emotion, because grateful just ain't gonna cut it. Grateful is how you feel when someone loans you $1. Gratuitousness has awe. It's when you get help you didn't expect at levels you didn't think were possible. It also has hope and optimism in its recipe. You have endured an incredible loss, but you have endured, in part because you've had the strength to come together, and in helping each other, in helping us, you have helped yourself. I like to believe my story about Mr. Seeley and Hughes and Matera and Peacock coming together is real. I know there's value in that, just as I know our friends and extended family, what they mean to us, and what this gathering means to me, and hopefully means to you. So as we remember and honor your loved ones, it is with a gratuitousness spirit that I join you in praying, eternal rest grant upon them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. May they rest in peace. God bless you all.